Hello, everybody, and welcome back to an episode of Show Up with Cameron Gran. I am your host, Cameron Gran. And before I start, as this is just a reminder that I'm not a therapist, I'm just somebody going on his own mental health journey, trying to give you guys little tips and tricks that you guys can use or leave. It's up to you to try things out and figure out what works for you in your own mind. Because there are things that I've heard that sound sweet and awesome in the moment, and then when I've tried them in my own brain, they usually end up hurting me more than being a success. And then when I've been like, okay, I understand this works for other people, but it doesn't work for me, that release and not like holding myself to something that would be impossible for my own brain is very powerful. And that's why I wanted to take that moment to remind you guys. Another reminder that this episode, I'm going to stick to 30 minutes. If you guys watched or listened to the episode last week, you will remember the fact that I was sick. I have since been mostly recovered, but my voice is still this way. I kind of lost it for a while, and I was coughing, and I had a huge runny nose, and it was just gross last week, which that's why I'm saying if you watched it, thank you. If you didn't, I understand. Nobody wants to see that. But I just wanted to say that I'm only going to do 30 minutes because I don't really have a voice still, and I don't want to like strain or hurt myself because I'm trying to do too much because like I said, we all know what we're capable of, and I know that I'm not capable of talking for that long. Ironically, I'm doing this late at night, and I feel great throughout the day, and then it gets to like late, and I'm like, listen, I know there's a thing called being tired, but this feels like way further past being tired than I normally am, so I probably should go to bed. But I'm not at that point yet, but I'm just like lately this past week because I have been sick, I've definitely noticed that drain in my brain. The other thing I will say is I'm going to make this like a catch-up episode just because October's over, a lot of things have happened. Something I wanted to address just because it's the day before. Actually, when you guys listen to this tomorrow, the 4th, it will be the anniversary, like a 2-year anniversary of my mother's passing from a fentanyl overdose. Something that is still prevalent with people who, I know fentanyl is just something that's really scary. I was aware of this, and I wasn't part of people who are addicts. Like I didn't have any like exposure to drugs before, but I was aware that it was happening, and then like a lot of people were overdosing from it. But both my mother and my sister don't do a lot of research and don't like follow things that closely. And so I guess I just wanted to start off this episode just like saying be careful if you are somebody out there who is at risk of this kind of thing, because I wish that my mother had told me. I mean, here's the thing that I'll say is the reason why I love the show Mom and why I've broke it down on this channel and why I'll continue to do that is it's, to me, the reality of having a relationship with somebody who's an addict. Because my thing is I never been like an expectation of being completely cured. Because it is something that your brain gets trained to need to feel happy. And so you'll probably have relapses and you'll probably struggle. But if you pretend it doesn't exist, that gives that thing power over you. Whereas if you accept that it's a part of yourself and then you figure out a game plan of how to either avoid it or figure out how to get help or how to set yourself back up for success if you do have a relapse, that is a good, like those are good things that show that you are trying to live a healthier lifestyle even when you have fallbacks. And or just the fact that on the show Mom they talk openly about it, because that's really all I ever wanted from her was like if she was struggling or if she was doing those things, just to tell me openly and then be like I can't be there for her like 100% because I've never, that's not something I've ever experienced, but I like mental struggles trying to dive into things that are hard are things that I can definitely sympathize with because I've had my own mental health struggles. Also, I feel like there are a lot of those kind of struggles in my family, and I'm one of the few people who are willing to A, openly talk about it, and then 2, figure out what I need to do to get past those things. Because even though I have had relapses of my own when it comes to like my mental struggle is like ideation of hurting myself, and I've fallen into those things before, and sometimes I've had a couple of near instances, and all those things were different and they were different setups, but when they were happening, I felt isolated and alone. But only the first time is when like I felt the most scared, because the other times I figured out like how to get a community or how to talk about those things, because not talking about it, feeling like it's a shameful thing. I'm talking about suicide, and I'm saying that openly because I don't think that a word should be so looked down upon, because I feel like so many people think about it, and right now there's a huge thing on social media to like use other words for something, because if you use the right word it feels like it's too aggressive, or like I don't know, like you're making all these things so that you can make that suicide sound harder than it is. Because if you just talked about it, because I don't know, it's adding to the stigma is the point I'm getting to. Because like not talking about it was more scary for me, and then trying to figure out how to tell people when people can't read minds is like, there are times I tried to tell somebody and I thought I told them directly, but because it's a harsh thing to use that word directly, you don't use it because you're afraid that by saying what you actually mean outright, people will run away. Whereas if I just said the exact word, the person would get what I was talking about, and then there wouldn't be a whole bunch of miscommunication happening. Sorry, that's the sickness happening. But like, it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, if we just talked about it, or we checked in, or stopped assuming that everybody was doing great just because they haven't talked to us in a while. Again, I'm always going to advocate for, if there's somebody that you love and you haven't heard from them in a while, please take some time to call and reach out to them, because you don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know how they're feeling or what they're going through. Again, no, I don't talk. I made jokes about my friends, because my mom is my mom, and they don't like. They're not like, they'll know my mom passed away, but they're not gonna like memorize the day that she did. But like, I sometimes, because I have been in bad emotional states, will recognize when those emotional states are beginning, and so I was like, I tried to warn people, because there is conscious emotion and constant like treatment, and then there's subconscious treatment. And you being a jerk to somebody is never okay. But there are times where I've been jerks to somebody and I didn't realize that I was acting out something without like, but it had nothing to do with the real situation in front of me. And when I started talking about it and saying it out loud, that's when I was like, oh, that's what this is about. And so sometimes I'll warn people, just so they know that like, if I'm off, or if I make a joke that's like harsher than I normally make jokes, it's probably because of I'm trying to express those emotions so they don't latch on to me, because that's been hard for me, is like, because I'm not, it's a bitter thought. It's like, I was working towards a better relationship with my mom, and it was going somewhere, and then she started using it and didn't tell me, so I couldn't warn her if she was going to use. So then she passed away from fentanyl. And then my bitterness that I have is like, that was time that was taken from us, that we could have actually had a true mother-son relationship. Like, us working on it and knowing that like we were going towards something is enough to make it so I'm not like, oh, I missed out on something, because I know that it would have gotten better eventually. And also, again, the thing that I always remind people, because this is one example, because there are other things that people do that are harming people that they love. But it's like, we all have these ideals that we have of a person in our head. But that just because you have an image of like your mom or your sister doesn't mean that your mom or your sister are actually those people. And sometimes like, I'll talk to somebody and they'll think that I'm still the same guy that I was like when I was 12, and I'm almost 30. And it's like, that's a lot of life that's happened since we last like hung out, or like we last spoke, or last were really around each other for a huge long time. And so you're just assuming my reactions. And then I have started working on like how I react to people, because I was always isolated and I was bullied so much that like my instant response was always, don't let it show, be like, and sometimes it was defensive. So I had some like resting like jerk face. That's the PG way of saying that. And that was mostly because I'm like, okay, well, we're not going to say anything, because if I say something, then people either use it against me or they'll make fun of me for it. And I'm not going to like do anything to like prevent, look, because I don't know why, but when people bully me, a lot of other people I've met are like, oh, somebody's bullying me, I'm gonna reach them where they're at and give it back to them, so they know how it feels. Me, And I don't know why I've always had this in me, because like part of like everyone like is like, oh, I have this perfect comeback I'm gonna say, or like I have this perfect way of showing this person the exact thing that they treated me like. But for some reason in my head, if you treat others how you want to be treated, that to me that's like almost along the same lines of like karma, is like whatever energy you send out is the energy that will come back to you. And maybe that, and then I've never associated with like that being that exact person. Like if I make this person feel bad, then at some point later on, that negative energy I gave to that person is going to come back to me in another way. And that's why it's hard for me to like make other people feel bad if they've made me feel bad, because I never want to harm someone the way that they harmed me. And that's sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing, because it usually means that I let people get away with things way longer than they should. And I've worked on that through therapy, and it's like, no, if you want to be in my life and you want to be present and you want to be here, then you got to treat me like you actually care that I'm here and that I'm present. If I'm just somebody that you're like, hey, what's up, guy? I'm like, oh, okay. Well, we're like passing in the hallway type of like friends. We're not like, oh, I want to be in your life long term. I like, and that's hard for me also, is because when I make friends with somebody, like when I truly make friends with them, I think I love all my friends. And what I mean by that is like I love deeply. And so it's why it's hard for me to end friendships sometimes, is because I don't want to say I'm in love with them, because that sounds like it's not really romantic for me, but it's like I love them and I want to treat them how I want to be treated, because they matter so much to me. And when I say I'm your friend, usually in my head, I picture friendship as a long-term thing. And if I don't want to be around you for the long run, I probably won't engage with you in a friendship. And I'll just make it like we're passing in a hallway. Like I'll say hi and maybe we'll casually catch up, but I won't like go out of my way to chat with you, because like that's not our thing. And if like casual talking is not friendship to me. And there are people who can do that. Like I've met a lot of people who are very social, and they can make friends like a drop of a hat. They're super close. And then really when you listen to them talk to this person, really they don't share anything. And and the people that I recognize that mostly with are the people who are like I can't say this word and I want to. Chameleons. Sorry, when I started saying it started like comedian, but chameleons, like they change who they are for the people that they're around at the time. And I've had it where like I go back to like regression is another thing, where like, oh, I have high school friends, and so I'm going to treat them like exactly how we were treating each other in high school. And I think that's a fun bit. Like I've had friends where I'll do that with them, and like we both know we're just doing a bit about stuff we used to do in high school, but we are not the same people. But other people are like, what is happening? And they think that we are those people still. And it's just a fun thing to do. Like I've had friendship with people who are like for over 10 years, and no way do I think that they are the same person that I met the first day of college or the same first day of high school or like in the haunted house. Like people change, and then like I try to call and show people that I care about them, even if it's been a long time. And maybe this is because it's November and I'm thinking about Thanksgiving, but like the haunted house that I started acting in, I only had it for like 3 or 4 years, and then it like went down and under. But everyone that I met in the haunted house, I care for and have a huge respect for, and they had a huge impact on my life, and I love them. Which is why a couple of the people from the haunted house, I asked them to do like my short films that I've done, because A, they're super talented, and B, they understood the kind of creative brain that I love, which is like, oh, you love makeup, and I love this, I love storytelling, and then like, but like you like storytelling through makeup, and like this is the story I have in mind, and so like it's collaborative, it's talking, and that's why I've loved other parts of the industry that I've touched. It's like I love acting the most, but I also don't mind directing and like art design and like that kind of stuff, because all those little elements that you're doing with a whole bunch of other creative people are all adding up to this a beautiful story that you're going to tell. And sometimes I've used like acting to just express deep-rooted pain that I've had that will never get the chance to come to fruition, because I had a lot of resentment towards my father, because I left home and I realized the things that hurt me so much with him, and you will never. And this is something I'm going to say just because I feel like people have a false thought in their head when it comes to like, oh, when I confront my parent, I want them to make up for that time that I lost. And I have never been that kind of person, because that time is lost. It's never going to come back. Like when you think like, oh, this, you treated me this way when I was 12. I'm not going to magically rewind time and be 12 again. What I wanted from you is acknowledge that you did it, and then B, figure out, because like if you do, like, because this is how it works, is like if you acknowledge that you did something problematic in the past, especially when it comes to like how you treat somebody that you love, if you acknowledge that, then you can start noticing those behaviors that are stemmed from the same problem. So like my dad gaslit me like nobody else. Like I did not believe my own reality because he would not let me believe it. Like I told the story before about like my PS2. I don't give a crap about my PS2. Or, you know, it was the fact that I had a whole bunch of games, and my father, as a punishment, decided that he was going to take my PS2 and make it disappear. And instead of just telling me, I'm mad at you, son, so I'm taking your PS2 away, he was like, what? You never owned a PS2? What are you talking about? It never existed. And then because I lived with my also stepmother at the time, I remember going to her and asking her about it, and she's like, well, yeah, you never had one. And I was like, what is the conspiracy? Why would you allow somebody to gaslight somebody that hard? Because I'm like, he did it. I don't know how, but I went to a lot of people and asked him about it. And I'm like, why are you so determined to gaslight me, to make me believe that? Because it's like, you shouldn't use this when you're going through mental health. Like if you're going to therapy, this is not a true thought, and I'm voicing it because there are certain times when you're supposed to believe the people that love you. Like you're supposed to believe your father. You're supposed to believe your mother. Like they're supposed to be the ones that look out for you, who care for you, who tell you the truth when everybody lies to you. Now, obviously, we are all like, well, your mom wants to encourage you. Your father wants to encourage you so you can continue these things that you love, even though you might not be the best at it. Like those kind of like white lies are not what I'm talking about. It's like, because like if other people are telling you that you're talented in that something, then it's not just your parent. But like the thing that I was bothered by is I was like, why is not only did he gaslighting with this thing, but he went to other people to gaslight me, to the point where I honestly for a week thought that I had imagined this thing for myself. But then I'm like, well, if he wanted me to believe that this never happened, and maybe it's because I'm a storyteller and I'm like, if I wanted to like do this to somebody else, I would do the extra mile of removing the evidence that it ever existed. And you're not going to convince me that this was never part of my reality if all the video games that you bought me for my PS2 are still in the drawer where I put my games. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's one small example of the type of gaslighting that my dad did to me growing up. And he wouldn't agree with me that he did it, and two, he wouldn't admit that it's a problem, that he would rather not admit what he did and gaslight me than just say, I did this and I'm sorry, it was wrong of me. And my mom used to do that also, where she would just like pretend things weren't happening. And that's something that I called her out for when we weren't talking for a while. And I'm like, I need you to admit that you did these things. And then when you admit them, just own it. Like, own your stuff. That's not the word I normally use, but again, I'm on the radio. But like, just own what you do to other people, because we all mess up. We're all human. We're not 100% perfect. Inside Out 2 is brilliant because we all have the potential to be good human beings, but we all have these negative thoughts that also exist. And so really all we're doing is balancing the scale back and forth, trying to ride that middle path, rather than trying to like adhere to something that is eventually will feel like an impossible outcome, which is kind of what anxiety does to you. It's like, oh, you're trying to meet a standard that is impossible, but people are gaslit you so much to make you believe that it's possible. And so then you're just like living under this false narrative rather than trying to believe a truth. And so I just wished that my father would have come to me and just punished me for whatever I don't even remember what I had done at that point to make him want to like take something from me. Because the only thing I remember at that time is we lived in, this is before we moved to like a bigger house with my stepmother. And all I remembered is I had no interest in gardening. And they decided that not only did they want to garden, but they wanted to then take on like milling and doing all these things I'd never done in my life. And they wanted me to do it. And I'm like, I have never shown interest in any of this stuff. And so it's one thing to like help you, like, because I did mow the lawn, but it's like there's one thing to be like do the bare minimum of helping you upkeep, and then jumping on and helping you with your hobby. Because like I don't care about gardening, and it wasn't like, oh, we're growing vegetables. It was like she had a very much like specific way of she wanted to have plants and stuff, and I'm like, it had something to do with the fact that I didn't want to do the things that would make her life easier, especially after she told me that she wanted nothing to do with me. It was very like, it's very strange to have somebody tell you that they want nothing to do with you, and then for your parent to then punish you for not wanting to do things for somebody who you told me about, you know? Like my father told me that that's what she said, and then wanted me to help her with stuff. And I just think that was I thought it was totally backwards, because it's like, if I'm worthless to you and you want nothing to do with me, why are you trying to force me to give you free labor? Like, there's no benefit to that. You're not bettering our relationship together. There's no goal for this except that you want me to give you labor. And that was more of, I remember being my issue at the time with that, is I was like, this isn't for the house. This isn't for my father. This is for somebody who didn't want anything to do with me. And that was more of what was driving me crazy, which is then why throughout middle school after that and high school, I tried to book myself so busy so that I never had to spend any time at home, which I do love, like volunteering and helping out and like being in shows and that kind of stuff. But like eventually I was like, I'm in like a whole bunch of shows, and like 2 of them I'm somebody, and then 1 person I'm just standing on stage looking at nothing and don't even have lines. I'm just there. And I'm like, did I need to be in this show? Was this beneficial? Because like sometimes I'd be in just like, I'd be out there and I had jazz band at 5 a.m. and I wouldn't get out of rehearsal till 11. So like so I had 5 hours of sleep, and I did that for a while. And it was just like one of those things where I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? And then I was like, okay, so how can I book myself? But like, I'm still working through the fact that I love singing and I love instruments and I love music. And then I was never allowed to do this, and so I thought there's something wrong at me for wanting to do anything musical. And so I just regressed. It's like when somebody knows that you love something, and then they make a whole bunch of rules where you can't practice the thing that you love. So then you feel like there's something wrong with you, and you deserve to exist in your own space. And because I wasn't allowed to do music, that's why I was playing a lot of video games. And then I think that's what it came down to, is I was being punished for only playing video games and not doing something more productive. And it was because the things I wanted to do productively, I was told I wasn't allowed to do. And that always bothered me, because I loved band and choir in high school. And the amount of times, like, I knew that I should have been further along in my practicing and like my ability, and like teachers were counting on me. I got solos and stuff, and then I would perform and I would feel bad because I'm like, this is 1/10 of how good I could have made this, and I was not given the freedom to make it as good as it is. And I'm having a revelation, and I think that's when Susan, who again is my stopper. She's the force field I invented to like stop myself from doing things that I could fail at, or stop myself from loving something because most of the things that I loved were taken from me, are made to be belittled. So I felt like they were unworthy of accomplishment. And to me, it was a protective force field that I was putting up to prevent myself from more pain. And now I'm working through how to let Susan go, because I want things for myself. I want to get back into music. I want to do these things, but I still have those issues. And I made a film about the fact that my father left me with all these issues, and all I ever wanted him to do was listen and hear me out and then work on our relationship. So that way, when I don't like the term like, oh, he's your father, or oh, she's your mom. Like when people throw those things out to you, that like it's those are automatic obligations you have to somebody. And I do, like, in my head, that's like that obligation is what I want to operate on. But I was not given the ability with my mother or my father to live off of those obligations. They were used against me to hurt me. If that makes sense, is like the easiest thing, like the thing that I dreamed about doing, I can't do anymore because both my parents are passed, is I wanted to give back to them and like help them. And like I was planning on moving to California before my mom passed. And I asked her because I knew that she was surrounded by a whole bunch of negative influences. And I was like, it would be hard. But my mom and I, if we moved together, could like actually afford a living space that would be more reliable, and she could start over without easy access to the things that were harming her. And that was a huge step for me because I originally said I would never going to live with my mom again because of the stuff that she was doing when I was living with her. And I was just like, if we continue having this open dialogue, because it was like I was like 6 months away. I was like, I have to wait till the end of the year because that's when my rent at like whatever it's called, like the contract, whenever the contract is up. I was like, after this, we can like then decide to move, and then I can get you out of there, because she was staying in a town where nobody was really hanging out with her, and she was just by herself all the time. And so I was like, why are you staying there? Because the thing that you said that you wanted from there, because it's around family, none of the family are actually coming to see you. So you're really by yourself, isolated all the time. And so I thought it was a good thing because I was like, this could be we're better than we are. And also you're kind of getting more sick. And so I don't know, it's like one thing I wanted from my mom and I was just to have a close relationship, and I could work on that while being in California because I can't go back to my hometown. Not because I didn't have people in my hometown that I liked. It's because there are too many like patterns and too many like ways of being that I was taught that if I went back there I would be reminded of them, and I might fall back into that negative headspace that made me feel worthless. And I never want to feel that way again. And I don't think it's a direct result of my mom or I was gonna say or my father, but my dad did it to me, and what I don't know, because my dad was somebody that I wanted to be closer with, and I wish, because the talks I was having with my mom before she passed were the talks I was trying to have with my dad. This was without me knowing that he was like my mother, like, both my parents kind of passed in like a rapid way, but I wanted to be closer with my parents, but neither of them would acknowledge the things that made us not be close. And when my mom started to, that made me feel very good, because I'm like, oh, now we can work towards actually being mother and son. And like, I made a film about the fact that like sometimes your parents leave you with so much trauma, and you want to work through that with them so that way you can have a close relationship. Because a lot of times people are like, I'm sorry. When you're older, you'll have a friend relationship with your parents. They'll be there for you again, like they weren't there before, because now you're both adults, and you. Oh, wow, it's really flaring up, and you weren't before. And those are just the thoughts I'm having because we're getting so close to my mother's date of when she passed away. It's not when her funeral was, but like tomorrow is the day that I got the call that she passed. Sorry, I'm taking a drink of water. But it's a thing that I taught myself that I'm worried about repeating, and it's because it's a negative thing, because it's like I call it the robot. And like there's a famous thing in my music class, which is like eat, sleep, practice, repeat. And it's like you should practice all the time. Practice helps you improve in music. But the thing that I was worried about is it's like when your life feels like you're doing the same pattern over and over again, sometimes there's beauty in repeating the pattern. And then sometimes the pattern is a way of not living, because you're not being mindful. You're just letting life pass you by because you're just repeating the same pattern, because it's easier than trying to push for something that might not succeed. In other words, you'd rather have the same bad result than risk trying and really caring about having something and failing again. And I'm working towards accepting failure because failure is a part of life. And I was always put in this negative mind space that like the idea of putting myself and caring so much and then getting like spit in the face by a lot of people and by a lot of people that I was close to. That's when I was like, I'm just going to be this robot who just exists. So that way, if somebody leaves my life or somebody treats me negatively, it's like they're out here. They're not actually like penetrating my soul. And for me, that's a negative thing. You should have a boundary where like people that you don't like. I don't have this for people I don't know, and I'm grateful for that because usually if I feel negative or I'm feeling like hurt, it's because somebody I loved is treating me very terribly. And I want to be open with them, but like something I learned through DBT is that everyone's on a balancing scale. And then if somebody treats you badly, even if you love them so much, you need to be okay with walking away. Because otherwise you are giving them all the power in a relationship, friendship, whatever it is. And by giving them all the power, you are only allowing yourself to have only one option, which is misery. Which is like if you have a friend who you've planned to go to like London with, and then you made all these plans and you spent all this money, and then you go to London, but the day you're about to leave, you get in this huge argument, and then your friend is like, I don't want to talk about it because we're going on vacation. I don't want to talk about it. So then you're trying to go through London and be happy, but then there's that thing that you guys argued about that was really serious, and so every single day of London is ruined because you're not allowed to speak about the thing that is harming the friendship. Whereas if you had just been like, okay, we fought the day before we went on to London. We live in America. We're going to take this very long car ride, or well, more likely plane ride, to go to England. So, I mean, I'm a very calm talker, so I probably could have this argument on a plane. Or you could be like, okay, we be agreed, like, plane rides are iffy for people. So like, hey, can we have a truce until we get to the hotel in London? And then we need to sit down and hash this out. So that way London isn't ruined for us, because it was very important for our friend group to not only raise the money to fly to London, but because we had all these dreams and wishes that we both wanted to see each other get once we were here. And that's kind of the stuff that, I was working towards with my family. Is I was like, well, we all have these dreams about what we wanted to be as a friendship or like as a parental child relationship that I need to address to give you what you want, because I don't like the pretending it didn't happen thing, because that, like, not pretending something didn't happen is making it so the relationship that you have today will never be a true, authentic relationship, because you will never allowed to address the pains of your past. Because literally, I think once my mom and I talked about it, it was one conversation, maybe 20 minutes. And then I was like, okay, now that I've said this to you and you understand it, we can just be like working on how can we make this current phase of our relationship work. It's like, oh, you like to make my mom had a very big thing about like wanting everybody who's related to her to be happy with each other. And so I sometimes got in arguments with people, and then she would try to meddle, and I'd have to stop her and be like, hey, listen, I know that she's your, well, I mean, I have a lot of aunts, but I had a problem with one of her sisters. And I'm like, I understand she's your sister, but we have issues. And you're not the one I'm angry with, but you're coming at me as though you're on her side. Are you telling me that you side with her when you bring her up? And she's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I was like, okay, well, that's what it feels like, because you are not involved with why me and your sister are not talking with each other. You can tell your sister that if she wants a relationship with me, she needs to talk to me. But you don't need to tell her what I tell you, and she doesn't need you don't need to tell me what she says to you either. Like, our issues are with each other, and as adults, we should be able to have one-on-one conversations with each other, you know? It's like, and it's very middle school and high school where you're like, oh, I have a friend and we both have like a shared mutual friend, but the mutual friend is the one that's trying to save a relationship instead of the two people who are arguing. I had a similar thing with my friend group where like two of my friends were like fighting, and then they were both, because I was present when this fight started, and then they were both turning to me and like are like be like venting and then being like, right, you understand what they did. And I'm like, I was there and I was present. I know, like, because of who I am as a person, whose side I'm on, and I'll tell you that I'm on their side and I'll tell you why I'm on their side, but I'm not going to go to the other person and make you be friends. I'm also not going to go because you've told me all this and relay it to them. A, I'm not an owl. And B, if you guys care about each other, you'll sit down and talk about what happened and move past it. Because, but again, I don't know. To me, it's also maybe they just weren't close friends, but also toxic masculinity is a thing that I've never understood because I've always been made fun of as a guy who's like, can we just talk about what we're upset about? Like, I don't understand why silence is the better choice than just addressing what we did to hurt somebody else. Also, there are things in that situation that I would never touch. Like, for me, if you're my friend, I have a very like physical no. Like, if you want to like fist bump me, sure. If you want to high five, sure. Hug, sure. Other like, but like if you're like aggressive and you're like punching, no. And I'll tell you right away. And what's funny is I used to have like a no like flipping off rule, and then like as I got closer with people, I'm like, okay, maybe we just gotta like tell each other before we do it, or like we know what situations are okay with it. But it's like that situation dived down to like somebody punched the other person or somebody was very aggressive, and I'm like, hey, listen, things were said. I get why you want the other person to be wrong and that's why you're not talking to them, but you're the person that laid hands. And so that was kind of a thing for me where I'm like, laid hands, you're always in the wrong. I don't care who said something or you're provoked. I do not care. Physical touch is more aggressive than anything somebody else could ever say. And if you get to that step, then the person who laid hands is the person that needs to apologize or initiate. But again, that's me and my own belief. Other people don't feel that way because they don't have those same boundaries, and also I don't have the same kind of like, I'm not gonna, it's not, I don't know, I'm not going to call it specifically toxic because to me it like derives from a way of being a toxic masculinity thing. But like girls have done this too, and I've seen them do it. So it's not like inherently just about like guys. It's just like one of those things where I'm like, it's always been a hard no for me. I have stopped talking to people because they were like, they just touched me in like a very physical way. And maybe this has to do with like PTSD I have from like at times when I was assaulted, but that's why I have that hard rule. I'm like, oh, if you hit me, we're no longer friends. That's always been my hard no. Now, maybe, well, but here's the thing. Because sometimes people say things to provoke somebody else. And I think as a child, but again, this would never happen with a friend. I think when I was in middle school, I might have said things that like somebody might have hurt me because the things I was saying were kind of rude and I didn't realize it. But now if I say something that's kind of rude, usually it's because I never heard something that was different. And it's like one of the things that I love that I've had a lot of friends talk about is like, oh, it's not that you're dumb. It's more of like we are all human, and we are all birthed to different people, to different folks. We all have different statuses. We all have different things that taught us how to be like. So we all have these different boundaries and ways of being. And what I love is like the more people that I meet that are just like, oh well, you're not stupid. You just have never been shown that thing before, and so that's why you didn't know that was an issue. And the people that if I ever mess up and somebody says that to me, I'm like, I want to try to make them my friend because I will mess up. I don't always get social cues, and so there are things that I've never been exposed to that when people get upset at me by, they like I don't understand who people are like. You didn't know this thing. Like, how could you do this? This is such a big no. You would never do this. And I'm like, well, how would I know that if I've never been around that kind of thing? Like, why are you like so angry or so like you're like, because it's never like, oh, I'm upset with you. It's like, now you're no longer human to me because you did something that's just so problematic. And like, if it's so problematic, just tell me what happened. Like, you're just turning me into a villain when we were friends 2 seconds ago and not telling me what happened. Like there have been times where people have like I've said something I didn't realize it was offensive, and then that person kind of disappeared, and I'm like, this person's always around, we're always talking, we're really close friends, and now all of a sudden they're like ditching behind corners and like. And again, this is during high school, so I didn't blame them because it's kind of high school tactics just to like avoid and ghost. But I was just like, I really care about this person, and they're kind of avoiding me, and very obviously because like I saw you and you pieced like about facing and like going the other direction is an avoidance tactic, and I'm like, oh, I must have upset them, and the only thing I think that I could have upset them about was because I made a joke, and I didn't think the joke was offensive because. It's amazing to me when you watch enough movies and like TV shows. Like, I have joked about things that I thought were fine because I've seen them like 1,000 times on television, and so I'm like, oh, it's fine because people make fun of it and people laugh. So it must be like generically okay because it's on like a public television show. Not always the case. I have now realized not every show is made for every single person. But like that was kind of the situation that happened with that person, and I was like, hey. I care about you, and you've been avoiding me. What happened? And then, because that was a huge thing for me, is I was like, oh, well, I said something that really upset them, and like I didn't think the joke I said was bad, but then I was like, oh, well, that joke didn't land with them because of who they are and what they believe, and so now I'll know not to make those kind of jokes in front of you, but just tell me that I said that and it upset you, and like, because I'm like, well, even if I find a joke funny, I can be like, oh, this joke is not for this person, and I won't say this for this person. And then it's also like, oh, I probably won't make this same joke for people who are like this person, and then we'll all be good because now I'm aware that this could be deemed as offensive. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, that's not an excuse for bad behavior. That's not what I'm saying. It's just more of like, oh, that never even crossed my mind because the amount of times I saw people making this joke and it being okay. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, once you're exposed to bad behavior and you recognize it as bad behavior, you can change it. And that's kind of the thing that I have in my brain is like, I learn things through pathways. And if I've walked that path and gotten a certain result, I'll know I'll never repeat that result because it's something that's bad. But if I've never walked that path, I don't know how you're going to expect me to not. Like, I mean, obviously my intention is always to like respect other people and like try and care for them. But sometimes you say things like by mistake, or you say things you think they're funny and people don't find them funny. And that is okay. And it's a way of like bettering yourself and kind of recognizing like boundaries and like where the line is. Because that's something I love about comedians. It's like, oh, well, they're trying to make something that's a good point and observation, but they have to find the line of like what's the difference between a joke and just insulting somebody. But like, it's not everybody's obligation who hears your joke to do that work with for you. You know what I'm saying? It's like you have to like do that as a writer. And that's kind of a thing that I learned is like, oh, I need to like, because I used to have a lot of judgment because I'm like, other people know this, I didn't know that, and then I realized, oh, this person is just trying to gaslight me because they're upset, and they can't just tell me that they're upset. Their excuse for them being upset is that everyone would have a problem with this thing and that I should have known it was a problem. And that's actually very helpful for me. Is like when you start doing mindfulness and then you become very concrete in what your boundaries are, then it's easier to catch people who are trying to make you second guess yourself. Because if you're not solid in who you are and your foundation, people will push and prod and make you believe that you're not actually solid in who you are. But when you are solid, they can't rock that boat. And so that's when you're like, oh, this person has an issue that they are dealing with and they don't want to share, but they're like taking it out on me because they don't know who to take it out on. Because that's the reason. Or this person doesn't like me and they just don't have, like, they don't they don't have it in them to just tell me they don't like me, because that's been the thing too. And I'm somebody who I love the dear man skill because if I love you, which is if I'm a friend with you, there's a chance that I love you. That's usually how my friendships work. So if I love you, I'm gonna sit you down. I'm gonna try the dear man skill. I'm gonna tell you what happened to try to solve it with you. And then if the dear man skill is also like, but if it doesn't work, then we won't be friends anymore. But like, to me, telling that person that like you might not be friends anymore is showing them respect and that you care about the relationship. But I've realized other people don't care about ending a relationship by telling the person that you're quote unquote breaking up with them, because a friendship breakup is not the same thing as a relationship breakup. And that's just something that I learned is like, oh, my way of going through reality and this world is not the same way of other people. But just because somebody else has found a way of going through life that works for them doesn't mean that it's wrong. And that's something that I feel like is challenged a lot in today's world. Like, oh, well, I would never walk this path and never do what you're doing, so it must be bad. And like, no, there's like my path and your path can both be good paths, and they can exist in the world together. And the world will still turn, and it will still be good, and we'll both still be happy. And giving somebody else the freedom to do that is also a beautiful thing. Because then you're acknowledging them as human and that their experience is worthy of just being their experience. Because we all have such a short time on this earth that to experience that is so beautiful. And I know this seemed like a lot of trauma dumping. I thought my point was more of just to make a point about like being solid in your foundation, listening and catching things, and also just being like, I know, solid who you are and just like trusting yourself and not allowing other people to like push you. That's kind of what I wanted to remind myself, and that I can only control myself and like be open to people if they want to talk about it. But if they don't, then I can't push them, and that's fine. Because I'm willing to fight for the people that I love, and other people may not be. But that's not my job to force them to fight for me, because if they didn't want to fight for me, then to clear, I wanted to quote Keanu Reeves, because like, is it even is it even love at all? It's kind of, he's very dramatic when he talks about love on Drew Barrymore's show. But that's kind of the thing, is it's like, oh, well, if you're not worthy to fight for me, then clearly we didn't have the same idea of what our friendship was or what our family dynamic was. And that's okay. But now I know, and I can like rearrange how I feel and be a better version of myself if we talk about our friendship more, if we're still like that, if it's happened, if it's ended and we're no longer in each other's lives, I can view that better. But it's all like, I need to be solid who I am, so that way I can be honest with you when we have those talks, and we can just go from there. And that's kind of my check-in for this month. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I was only going to talk for 30 minutes, but then I almost went to 50. So as you can tell, I needed to speak. Needed a refresher because, again, stuff's happened. Like Monday is the anniversary of my mom's passing. So just like make sure you look out for yourself this week. And as always, if you do take some time to just take a second, breathe, and like remind yourself just to show up for yourself, because you matter. Thank you. And have a good week. Bye.